I arrived at the beach house just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the sand. The air was crisp, and the scent of salt water filled my lungs as I stepped out of the car. It was October 9th, a date I had marked on my calendar for weeks, eager to escape the city's noise and spend a weekend alone by the ocean. The house stood isolated, with only the sound of waves crashing against the shore breaking the silence. It was the kind of quiet that felt almost too perfect, too still. As I unpacked my bags, a strange sensation crept over me, like I was being watched. I shook it off, blaming the feeling on my overactive imagination. The house was old but cozy, with a single dim light illuminating the living room. It felt like the kind of place that held secrets, but I was too tired to think about that now. I just wanted to relax, maybe read a book, and fall asleep to the sound of the ocean. That's when I noticed it. A faint light flickering deep in the forest behind the house. It was barely visible through the trees, but there was no mistaking it. The light pulsed gently, almost like it was calling to me. I stood at the window, my heart beginning to race as I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe it was just a reflection, or someone camping nearby. But the longer I stared, the more certain I became that it was something else, something out of place. I couldn't ignore it. The curiosity was too strong, overpowering the fear that was slowly building in my chest. I grabbed a flashlight, telling myself I would just take a quick look and then come back. The forest loomed dark and uninviting, but I stepped outside, feeling the cool night air against my skin. With each step towards the trees, the light grew brighter, more distinct. The sound of the waves faded as I moved deeper into the woods, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the crunch of twigs under my boots. I should have turned back. I knew it then, and I know it now. But something pushed me forward, deeper into the unknown, towards the light that seemed to be waiting for me. The further I walked, the more the forest seemed to close in around me. The trees were thick, their branches intertwining overhead, blocking out what little moonlight there was. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, but it did little to ease the growing sense of unease that gnawed at my mind. The light I was following flickered, almost as if it was aware of my approach, teasing me to come closer. I noticed the ground beneath my feet had changed. The sandy soil gave way to something more uneven and damp, making each step feel heavier. The forest was eerily silent, the only sounds being the soft crunch of leaves underfoot and my own breathing, which grew more labored with each passing moment. The air was thick, almost suffocating, as if the forest itself was alive, watching my every move. As I pushed further into the trees, I stumbled upon a clearing. The light was brighter now, and I could see it clearly. A small, abandoned campsite nestled in the middle of the woods. There was a fire pit, long extinguished, with charred wood and cold ashes scattered around. A few weathered logs were arranged in a circle, like seats around the fire. The scene was unsettlingly still, as if time had stopped here. My heart pounded in my chest as I moved closer to the campsite, the light now hovering above the fire pit. It didn't come from any visible source. No lantern, no flashlight, just a pale, ghostly glow that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that something was watching me from the shadows, just beyond the reach of my flashlight. I knelt down by the fire pit, my fingers brushing against the cold ashes. That's when I noticed something half buried in the dirt, an old, weathered journal. I picked it up, the leather cover cracked and worn with age. It felt heavy in my hands, as if it held more than just pages. My breath caught in my throat as I opened it, the pages brittle and yellowed, filled with scrawled handwriting. The entries were cryptic, filled with accounts of strange occurrences and eerie happenings in the forest. As I read, a sense of dread washed over me. The journal's author seemed desperate, their words becoming more frantic with each entry. I could feel their fear seeping into me, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Then, without warning, I heard it, a rustling in the bushes, followed by a low, almost imperceptible whisper. My head snapped up, the flashlight beam swinging wildly as I tried to pinpoint the source of the sound. The light above the fire pit flickered and dimmed, and the whispering grew louder, more urgent. Someone or something was out there. My body tensed as the whispering seemed to surround me, coming from all directions at once. I spun around, the flashlight beam slicing through the darkness, but there was nothing. No one. Just the trees, standing silent and foreboding. The light above the fire pit was fading fast, its glow now barely a flicker. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out every other sound. I knew I had to get out of there. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to leave the forest and never look back. But something kept me rooted to the spot, a morbid curiosity mingling with the fear that gripped my chest. Slowly, I reached for the journal again, flipping through the pages more frantically this time, searching for some explanation, some clue as to what was happening. Then I saw it, a name, scrawled hastily across the page, repeated over and over again in desperate, jagged letters. My name. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the breath from my lungs. How could this be? The journal looked ancient, the ink faded and smeared. Yet here was my name, written as if the author had known I would be here, at this exact moment. The forest seemed to close in tighter around me, the air thickening with an oppressive weight. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, and I realized with a jolt that it wasn't just noise. It was words. Words I could almost understand, slipping through my mind like half-remembered dreams. They were calling me, beckoning me deeper into the woods. I tried to stand, but my legs felt like lead. The flashlight flickered, the beam weakening as the batteries started to die. Panic surged through me as the light above the fire pit finally blinked out, plunging the campsite into complete darkness. I was alone, the whispers now deafening in my ears, drowning out every rational thought. Suddenly, there was a sound, a soft, deliberate footstep in the underbrush. My heart stopped. I wasn't imagining it this time. Someone was there, just beyond the circle of trees, watching me. I strained my eyes, trying to pierce the darkness, but saw nothing. The fear was almost paralyzing now. My breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. I knew I had to leave, had to run, but my body wouldn't obey. I was frozen in place, clutching the journal like a lifeline as the footsteps grew closer, each one measured and deliberate. My mind raced, searching for a way out, but the darkness was all-consuming, suffocating. I felt like a trapped animal, caught in a predator's gaze, unable to escape. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the whispering stopped. The silence that followed was even more terrifying, thick and absolute. I could feel the presence behind me, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Slowly, painfully, I turned around, the flashlight beam flickering weakly. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was a figure. The figure stood motionless, just beyond the reach of my flashlight. I couldn't make out any details, only the vague outline of a person shrouded in shadows. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The air around me felt charged with electricity, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. For a moment, neither of us moved. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, the sound loud in the otherwise silent night. The figure didn't approach, didn't make any sound, but I could feel their eyes on me, piercing through the darkness. The fear was overwhelming, but there was something else too. A strange familiarity, as if I had seen this person before. I took a hesitant step forward, my hand trembling as I pointed the flashlight directly at the figure. The beam was weak, but it illuminated enough for me to see their face. My breath caught in my throat. It was someone I knew, a friend who had promised to meet me at the beach house, but had never shown up. They looked just as shocked to see me as I was to see them. "What are you doing here?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. My friend didn't answer immediately, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and confusion. They seemed disoriented, as if they had been lost for hours, maybe even days. I could see the exhaustion in their expression, the relief mingled with something darker, something that made my skin crawl. Without another word, they gestured for me to follow them, their movements hurried and tense. I hesitated, glancing back at the journal in my hand before shoving it into my pocket. The urge to get out of the forest was too strong to ignore. Together, we made our way back through the trees, the sense of dread lingering in the air as we left the clearing behind. As we emerged from the forest, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon, casting a pale glow over the beach house. The night had been long and unsettling, but now, with the sun rising, a sense of calm began to settle over me. My friend and I stumbled back into the house, both exhausted but relieved to be out of the woods. The horrors of the previous night seemed to dissipate with the light of day. My friend explained that they had been searching for me after realizing I had gone missing. They had followed the same path I had taken, but it had led them deeper into the forest, away from any sign of the beach house. They had heard the whispers too, felt the same overwhelming sense of dread that had plagued me all night. It was a relief to know that I wasn't imagining things. We both agreed that something strange had happened, something beyond our understanding. The journal, which I had nearly forgotten, seemed to hold the key to the mystery. We decided to leave it behind, buried in the forest where it belonged. The beach house would forever be a place of memories, both frightening and exhilarating, but it was time to move on. As we packed our things and prepared to leave, the sun climbed higher, dispelling the shadows that had so haunted us. The forest, now bathed in daylight, looked completely different, less menacing and more inviting. But we knew better. The experiences of that night would remain with us, a dark secret we shared that bound us together in an unspoken bond. We drove away from the beach house, the road ahead clear and bright. The light in the forest had led us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and each other. Despite the fear and uncertainty, we found solace in our friendship and the knowledge that we had faced something together. The night was behind us, but the memories and the lessons learned would stay with us forever. Of coast, with the ocean waves crashing rhythmically against the shore. The house had an air of melancholy, as if it had been forgotten by time itself. I brushed off the chill that ran down my spine and started unpacking, eager to settle in despite the odd sense of foreboding. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. The house's creaky floorboards and the distant sound of seagulls only heightened the solitude. The isolation was both calming and eerie. I lit a few candles to ward off the encroaching darkness and prepared a simple meal, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease that seemed to linger in the corners of the room. As night fell, the shadows deepened and the house grew colder. I decided to explore the surrounding area, hoping a walk along the beach might dispel the uneasy feeling. The night air was crisp, and the moonlight cast strange shapes on the sand. It was during this walk that I noticed a faint light flickering in the distance, coming from a house further down the shore, one that looked abandoned. Curiosity got the better of me, and I ventured towards the light. The closer I got, the more it seemed to dance and flicker in an erratic pattern. The house loomed ahead, its silhouette dark against the night sky. The light seemed to be coming from within, but there were no signs of life, no sounds, no movement. It was as if the house itself was inviting me inside. I stood at the edge of the property, contemplating whether to approach. The light continued to pulse, almost rhythmically, like a heartbeat. A chill ran through me, but the allure of the mystery was too strong. Taking a deep breath, I decided to enter, feeling a strange mixture of excitement and dread. The door to the forgotten house creaked open with an unsettling groan, revealing a dimly lit interior. The light I had seen from outside was now revealed as a flickering oil lamp on a dusty wooden table. The room was filled with neglected furniture and cobwebs, giving the impression that no one had been here for years. The air inside was musty, carrying the scent of decay and age. As I stepped inside, the floorboards beneath my feet groaned in protest, adding to the eerie atmosphere. The lamp's light danced across the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to shift and move with a life of their own. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up, an instinctive reaction to the strange surroundings. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves as I moved further into the house. The light illuminated a staircase leading to the upper floors. Curiosity propelled me forward, despite the growing unease. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing through the empty house. The second floor was even darker, with only the faint glow of the lamp providing any illumination. I felt as if I was intruding on a place that should remain undisturbed. At the top of the stairs, I found a door slightly ajar. The flickering light from the lamp revealed a narrow hallway lined with old portraits whose eyes seemed to follow me as I passed. I pushed open the door, which led to a small, dusty bedroom. The bed was unmade, and a tattered journal lay open on a nightstand, the pages yellowed with age. The journal's entries were cryptic and disjointed, filled with references to someone waiting for a visitor. My name was mentioned several times, written in hurried scrawls. I couldn't understand why or how my name was in this journal, but the sense of foreboding grew stronger. The lamp's light dimmed suddenly, plunging the room into near darkness, and I felt an icy draft sweep through the room. In the pitch-black room, the sudden darkness was disorienting. I fumbled for the lamp, my hands trembling as I tried to relight it. The air grew colder, and I could hear the faintest whispering, like voices carried on the wind. My heart raced, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching me from the shadows. When the lamp flickered back to life, I noticed a peculiar change. The room seemed slightly different, as though it had subtly rearranged itself while I was in the dark. The journal was now closed, and the room's atmosphere felt heavier, more oppressive. I picked up the journal again, its pages now filled with more recent entries, describing a visitor who had arrived just like me, but had never left. The chilling realization hit me. The journal seemed to document the experiences of others who had entered this house before, their stories ending in silence. I scanned the entries, my eyes wide with fear as the writings became increasingly frantic. The descriptions of strange occurrences mirrored what I was experiencing now. The whispers, the changing room, the feeling of being watched. As I read, the lamp's light began to flicker erratically, casting erratic shadows on the walls. The whispers grew louder, converging into a single, coherent voice that seemed to come from within the walls themselves. My pulse quickened as I tried to make sense of the disembodied voice, which spoke in urgent tones, as if trying to warn me of something unseen. Suddenly, the whispers stopped, and an unnatural silence settled over the house. The temperature dropped dramatically, and I felt a cold hand brush against my shoulder. I spun around, but there was no one there. The room seemed to be closing in on me, and I knew I had to leave. But the house had other plans. It felt as if it was pulling me in, trapping me within its walls. I bolted from the room, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The hallway seemed endless, the shadows stretching and warping as I raced towards the staircase. My mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion, each step echoing loudly in the oppressive silence. I felt as though the house itself was trying to hold me back, its unseen forces conspiring against my escape. When I reached the top of the stairs, the flickering light of the lamp seemed to follow me, casting eerie reflections on the walls. I could hear the whispers again, now louder and more insistent. They seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere, a cacophony of voices that drowned out all other sounds. My anxiety spiked, making my movements feel sluggish and clumsy. I stumbled down the stairs, trying to ignore the growing dread that gripped my chest. The once familiar layout of the house now seemed distorted, the rooms twisting and shifting as if they were alive. I reached the front door, but it refused to open, as if some unseen force had sealed it shut. My panic turned into desperation as I pulled and pushed against the door, my strength fading with each attempt. Just as I was about to give up, the door swung open with a loud bang. I burst outside into the cool night air, gasping for breath and clutching my pounding heart. The house loomed behind me, its dark windows staring back like hollow eyes. I glanced back once more before sprinting towards the beach house, eager to put as much distance between myself and the cursed place. As I drove away, the house faded into the distance, its strange light still flickering in my memory. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something sinister. The whispers and the shifting rooms haunted my thoughts as I made my way back to the beach house. I didn't know what awaited me there, but I knew I had to leave the forgotten house and its mysteries behind. On January 7th, I drove to the old beach house I had inherited from my grandmother. It had been years since I last visited, and the solitude was both comforting and unsettling. The house stood at the edge of a snowy beach, its windows dark and lifeless against the winter landscape. I had come to clear out some belongings and close it for good, but as I approached, a sense of melancholy washed over me. The inside of the house was just as I remembered, filled with dusty furniture and forgotten trinkets. The fireplace was cold, and the once welcoming warmth of the house now felt distant and hollow. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the creaking of the old wooden floors. As I began sorting through boxes, a deep sadness settled in my chest, as if the house itself was mourning its past. I found an old journal among my grandmother's things, its cover worn and faded. Curious, I opened it to find entries detailing life at the beach house, filled with stories of family gatherings and quiet moments of reflection. The final entries, however, were different, filled with fragmented thoughts and references to someone or something that had disturbed her peace. The evening light waned quickly, casting long shadows across the room. The temperature dropped noticeably, and I could hear the faint sound of the wind howling outside. I tried to shake off the growing unease, focusing on packing up the remaining items. But the journal's unsettling content lingered in my mind, and I couldn't help but feel that something was terribly wrong. As darkness enveloped the house, I prepared to settle in for the night. The old creaky bed felt like an uneasy reminder of the past. I noticed that the temperature in the room had dropped further, the chill seeping through the walls and into my bones. The house seemed to groan and shift around me, as if it were alive and aware of my presence. As night fell, the wind howled more insistently, rattling the windows and making the house feel even more isolated. I tried to ignore the eerie noises, telling myself it was just the wind playing tricks. The shadows in the room seemed to lengthen and twist, creating strange shapes that danced along the walls. I wrapped myself in a blanket, attempting to find comfort in the familiar surroundings. The journal lay open on the table, its pages filled with my grandmother's handwriting. The entries spoke of a growing sense of dread, of strange occurrences and unexplained sounds. Her final notes were disjointed and cryptic, hinting at a growing fear of being watched or followed. I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was somehow connected to her distress. Around midnight, I heard a noise from the attic. A loud thump, followed by a series of scraping sounds. My heart raced as I stood up, deciding to investigate despite the creeping fear. The attic was accessed by a narrow staircase, and as I climbed it, the creaking of each step seemed unnaturally loud. The cold air grew even colder, making my breath visible in the dim light. The attic was cluttered with old furniture and forgotten belongings. I turned on a flashlight, scanning the area for the source of the noise. The room was filled with dusty boxes and cobweb-covered furniture, but nothing seemed out of place. The unsettling feeling persisted, as if something unseen was lingering just beyond the reach of the light. I checked the attic thoroughly, but found nothing unusual. The noise had stopped, leaving only the silence and the oppressive cold. I returned to the main floor, feeling a sense of unease settle over me. The house seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something or someone to arrive. My grandmother's journal was now closed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it held more secrets than it revealed. The night wore on, and sleep eluded me as the house creaked and groaned around me. The sounds from the attic had left me on edge, and every noise seemed amplified in the silence. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the icy chill that had settled in the room. My grandmother's journal lay beside me, its unsettling entries a constant reminder of the house's mysterious past. Just before dawn, I heard a soft whispering, barely audible over the wind. It seemed to come from the direction of the attic, a faint, mournful tone that sent shivers down my spine. I hesitated, unsure whether to investigate or stay in the safety of my room. The whispers grew louder, almost as if someone was trying to communicate with me from above. Summoning my courage, I got up and made my way to the attic once again. The cold was almost unbearable, and the whispering grew clearer, though the words were still indistinguishable. As I reached the top of the stairs, I noticed a faint light coming from beneath the attic door. It was a pale, flickering glow that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I opened the door slowly, the light growing brighter as I did. The attic was now illuminated by an old lantern, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. The lantern was positioned near an old chest, which was slightly ajar. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. The whispers had stopped, leaving only the eerie silence and the soft glow of the lantern. Inside the chest, I found a collection of old photographs and letters. The photographs were of my grandmother in various stages of her life, but there were also pictures of strangers I didn't recognize. The letters were filled with cryptic messages and references to a presence in the house. The final letter was addressed to me, but it was never opened. My hands trembled as I held it, the sense of foreboding growing stronger. With the final letter in hand, I felt a mix of dread and curiosity. The writing was hurried and frantic, detailing experiences of fear and isolation similar to what I was feeling. It spoke of an entity that had haunted my grandmother, an unseen presence that grew stronger with each passing day. The letter ended abruptly, with a desperate plea for someone to understand and escape before it was too late. As I read, the temperature in the attic seemed to drop even further, the cold seeping into my bones. The lantern's light flickered, casting erratic shadows on the walls. The sense of being watched intensified, and I could feel a pressure in the air as if the house was responding to the revelation of the letter's contents. I put the letter back into the chest, trying to process the unsettling information. Determined to uncover more, I examined the remaining items in the chest. The photographs revealed a pattern. Each person in them had a look of fear or sadness, and many were marked with strange symbols on the back. My grandmother had been keeping track of something, someone who had come and gone, leaving a trail of fear behind. It was clear that the house had a dark history, one that my grandmother had tried to document. The whispering began again, louder this time, and I could almost make out coherent words. It seemed to be urging me to leave, to get out before it was too late. The atmosphere in the attic was now suffocating, and I felt a cold hand touch my shoulder. I spun around, but there was no one there. The lantern's light went out abruptly, plunging the room into darkness. Panicked, I grabbed my flashlight and stumbled down the stairs. The house felt different now, more oppressive and menacing. The whispers grew louder, filling my ears with a cacophony of voices. I knew I had to leave immediately, but the door to the attic wouldn't open. It was as if the house itself was trying to keep me trapped inside. Desperation surged through me as I struggled with the attic door, but it remained firmly shut. The whispering had turned into a frantic, unintelligible murmur, making it difficult to think clearly. I could feel the walls closing in around me, the oppressive weight of the house bearing down. My flashlight flickered erratically, casting long, jittery shadows across the hallway. In a last-ditch effort, I kicked at the door, hoping to force it open. The old wood splintered under the force, but the door stayed shut. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening, and I felt a presence moving behind me. Panic set in as I realized that the house was actively working against me, trying to keep me from escaping its clutches. I backed away from the door, deciding to make a run for the front entrance. The house seemed to warp around me, the once familiar rooms now disorienting and maze-like. I raced down the stairs, but the stairs seemed endless, each step echoing louder than the last. My breathing was ragged, my heart pounding in my chest as I navigated through the darkened house. Finally, I reached the front door, but it was locked, the key nowhere to be found. My desperation reached its peak as I pounded on the door, yelling for help that I knew wouldn't come. The house was silent except for the persistent whispering, which seemed to mock my attempts to escape. I felt a cold hand grasp my arm, pulling me back from the door. In a final act of surrender, I slumped to the floor, tears streaming down my face. The whispering grew softer, almost sympathetic, as if the house was mourning my fate. I could see the dawn's first light filtering through the windows, casting a faint glow over the room. The oppressive atmosphere lifted slightly, but the door remained firmly shut. As the sun rose, the house fell silent, its malevolent presence receding with the night. I was found by authorities later that morning, disheveled and traumatized, but alive. The house was searched thoroughly, but nothing out of the ordinary was discovered. I left that place with a heavy heart, knowing that some mysteries were better left unsolved.